and we want to spend money to do it. And so I just want to thank Eric for having the vision for what we're going to talk about in Ministry Advantage, and for being a good practitioner of what we taught. You know, guys, we don't think that Ministry Advantage is, you know, the whole answer. I don't think anything's the whole answer except Jesus. You know, church, the answer is always Jesus, right? But I do think that with what we've been doing for 15 years now is a huge hole in the church, and I don't really know exactly when that happened or why that happened or how that happened, but it definitely happened. And so I actually believed in the beginning when we started Ministry Advantage that we'd probably do it for 5 years. We'd probably, you know, make a splash. We were probably a little ahead of the curve and talking about these things the way we do, and this kind of the specificity that we get to. And other people would catch on to it, and then, you know, it would be old hat, and, you know, we'd move on and do something else and say, God used us to do that for a while. The truth is that 15 years later, much to my shock, complete shock, it's just as bad as it's ever been in terms of what we need to, this kind of aspect of training that's really not in the body of Christ much in terms of church leadership. So I just want to make that clear. You know what our perspective is. You know, I do think that we're really good at what we do, and I think you know, we can claim that we're kind of experts at what we do. But I stand. Good morning. I stand in awe of most of you. I believe that most pastors I run into are better pastors than I am or I have been. So, and I really mean that. We're going to talk about a myriad of things. One of the things we're going to talk about is that God's given us all different strengths. And frankly, I'm kind of wired, kind of weird for the average pastor. There's I'm a bit of an oddity. A few of you may identify with that in that most pastors, you know, George Barna did some research years ago and said his data said 95% of pastors did not have a strong passion or gifting toward leadership. And what that meant was that most pastors, and frankly including me, most pastors don't get into ministry for the kind of stuff we're going to talk about. I don't know too many pastors just roll out of bed in the morning and go, hot dog, we're going to do some strategic planning today. Most pastors just go, oh my gosh, we got to do that. I got to do that. I know nobody knows where we're going. Nobody knows what we're doing. I got to do that. You know, so that's kind of how we got into it, because, you know, the way I describe my entry was I came to Christ and I just wanted to tell other people about Jesus, and I started with my best friend. And the only thing I knew was John 3:16. I was so excited that I'd been forgiven and God redeemed me. And so I was such a wretch. And, I came to Christ really as an adult. And I talked to my friend for 3 hours about John 3:16. It's the only verse I knew. And finally, I took the risk and I said, well, Brad, do you want to become a Christian? And he said, yeah. And I said, you do? Yeah. And so I led him in some kind of prayer. I think he got saved. I don't know what that word was. I was green. And then I said, well, man, Brad, I can't believe that you want to become a Christian. I mean, I was sure you were going to say no. He said, no, I want to become a Christian like 20 minutes into you talking to me. You want to shut up. So I gave him an extra 2 hours. So I could have closed the deal a lot earlier. So that's, you know, that's how most of us, I mean, most of us grew up, you know, we admired pastors, we were changed by Christ, we fell in love with the Bible, we want to teach the Bible to people. And honestly, 95% of pastors, I still believe that's our primary motivation. Okay, so 5% of us are weird. One of the things that I kind of describe it this way when it comes to preaching, and you guys will probably instantly know where you fall, because I think most of us fall in one of two camps. I think most pastors lead and do leadership stuff for the privilege of preaching and being the pastor. In other words, I do leadership stuff because it comes with the deal and I have to do it. But what I love is preaching and ministering to people and caring. That's what I love. but I got to do the leadership stuff just because it comes with it. Then there's people like me, which are definitely in the minority, and I preach for the privilege of leading. I love leading. I love building the church. I love growing the church. I love solving problems. Again, we're going to talk. We're going to give you guys all up. You'll take a personality assessment we call leading from your strengths. We don't think God talks about weaknesses. We think He talks about our strengths, and that's what we do. For 15 years or so, we've used an assessment. Over 300,000 people have taken to help you learn how to focus on your strengths. And so, you know, when we lead from our strengths, then I think, again, most of us our strengths are on the pastoral side, not on the leadership side. But the problem with all of this is that we're the leader. Okay? So like it or not, you know, if it's my passion, or if it's my gifting, or if it's my natural instinct, you know, again, my strengths are around leadership and problem solving. And the more I understood that over the years, you know, I basically understood that I wake up every day looking for a problem to solve. And that's exactly why I'm doing ministry advance, because believe it or not, even in a church of 10 or 12,000 now, I ran out of problems to solve. I got to go mess with somebody else's church. It's almost a disease, right? But I really do have a passion to solve problems, and in particular the church, because I saw that so many churches and so many of my friends had vision, they had passion. That's why our byline in Ministry Advantage is helping turn vision into reality. So if we have dreams but we can't make them a reality, then they're just pipe dreams. And when I started as a church planter, I planted both churches that I pastored, that I was the lead pastor of. The second one I pastored for 18 years. The last 7 years I've been in a friend of mine's church as I came on to be the pastor of multi-site ministries. So there was one campus in Rockwall at the time, running about 6,000 to 7,000 worship. And now we have 4 campuses. I'm responsible for everything off the main site. We have 2 standalone buildings that are about $16 million worth of buildings. We have 3,500 people between those 3 campuses and 40 staff. And people often say, the more they kind of figure out what I'm doing, they go, how do you do that? I got a meeting back at the church I can't keep up with. And the truth is, and I mean this sincerely, guys, I practice what we teach. I really do. I think that if you will lean into your strengths, if you will be smart about how you lead, if you will, even areas that you would kind of rather, as I say, chew glass than do, like some of you, this is not a particularly exciting event. If you kind of do the nature of it, some of you, you're almost like you come to the doctor to get some medicine. And some of you are intrigued, and maybe you'll find a few new answers. But I promise you, what we're going to talk about is rock solid biblical. It's been long forgotten and to some degree unappreciated in the church, and kind of hijacked by business. And I don't mind that. Business has a bottom line. The bottom line is to make money. They have shareholders. They got to make money for their shareholders. If they have a business, they got to make money for their family, and they should. They better, or they're going out of business. But our bottom line is so much more important. Our bottom line is somebody's going to heaven or not going to heaven. Some family's going to get their marriage fixed. Somebody's going to have their life redeemed. You know, I came to Christ really as a result of a bad little church. A little church of 100 people. And what I mean by bad was meant well, but was horrible in how it functioned. And I won't describe all the ways. Nothing compelling about it. Nothing where you would go, oh, I'm so inspired to be here. I'd like to give my life to the service of Christ. You know? I mean, in fact, my pitch to God when God convicted me as an adult, because as a kid I saw Christianity the first time in this bad little church. And then I went there, graduated from high school, went to the military, got out of the military, went to college. And so when I was sitting in church chasing this girl that I wanted to marry, and God got me under serious conviction, I said, well, wait a minute, you know, God, I'm willing to consider it, but I'm not willing to do what I saw as a child. I'm not going to give my life to what I saw as a child. There was nothing compelling, nothing inspiring, nothing that I could look up to do that, except that was the first place I ever heard the gospel, and I never forgot. And so I look back at that little church, as bad as it was, and it was, God used that little bad church in my life. So why do I talk about that? Because that's my benchmark, right? That's on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being Jesus is the leader of your church, right? Everything's going great. And I would say 1 is that bad little church that I first heard the gospel. So that's my benchmark. And my benchmark is, guys, if we can do anything just a little better than that, then somebody's life is going to change, right? So if we lead a little better, if we have a little more clarity, if our church, if we actually accomplish our dream get a little closer to it, if that little church could, in essence, be the church that I contribute to, actually communicating the gospel to me, where I first heard it, even though the church itself wasn't that great, then what can happen in a church that can do better than that? How many lives can change? That little church was in a little community, again, 100 people go there. I remember going to Sunday school and I had a different teacher in the room every time. Nobody wanted us. We were 3 or 4 of us were rebellions. I don't blame them. But I'm just saying, guys, I know that sounds like a kind of counterintuitive story, but in my mind it makes perfectly good sense. If God could talk to me through a church that wasn't so great, what could He do through good churches that can do a little better? And my view of this has always been, I love this kind of 5% better idea. So I'm not looking for us to go, from where I am today to be 100% transformed, better leader tomorrow, next week or next year. But if your church can get, because of your leadership, could get 5% more effective this year. Okay? You go, 5%, Russ, I'm coming out here, spend all this time for 5%. I'm hoping for better than that. But listen, 5% better this year. I mean, really effective. And then next year, you do the same thing. And you keep growing, and you keep learning, and you keep applying, and you keep establishing some disciplines in your church in this way of leading your church. And in addition to what you're already doing, which is probably great. But if you can get 5% better, more effective at doing what God's called you to do, accomplishing, achieving your vision in your community, reaching your people, and you do that for 5 years, right? That's a 25% increase in the impact of your church on your community. Guys, I'm telling you, a 1-2% impact of most churches in a community would be huge. But a 25%. So as we talk about a lot of things, and as we start to settle into Ministry Advantage, Eric knows what I'm talking about. You can start to go, wow, there's a lot here, right? Well, there is, but you got a lifetime, or how many years you got left in ministry to work it out. You got a coach, and this is the real difference with Ministry Advantage. So the first thing you can do is kind of relax, okay? Take a deep breath, exhale, because this is not a data dump like most conferences, right? And most, this is a place where we're going to teach you some concepts, and then we're going to give you a trained coach who's actually doing what we're talking about, right? That's our conviction, is that the best teachers are the people who are actually doing what they're teaching, than just talking about it. I always warn the young guys who, they come, have you read this book? Have you read this book? We ought to do this. And I said, okay. Well, first of all, I want to rejoice at them. Rejoice. Tell me what you're excited about. I don't want to throw water on your... But then let me ask you something. Who is this person who wrote this book? What church did they build? Are they actually doing what they're talking about? Is it succeeding? Is it, how do you know to work in your environment? So we really believe that the best coaches, and all of our coaches are pastors, right? So they're pastors just like you, who sat here one day, just like Eric, and learned what we learned. It was life transforming to them. I think the average response to Ministry Advantage to most of our pastors, things we hear over and over the years is, I couldn't really see myself doing this for another 10 years, 20 years, finishing the race, right? I'm going to show you some statistics here in a minute that are going to blow your mind. So the other thing is, guys, when I'm standing here, I know full well what I'm looking at. Me included. This is a dangerous business we're in right now. It's as hard as it's ever been. The chance that everybody in this room is going to cross the finish line, not very good. But the chance that we can cross the finish line, if we're wiser about how we lead, if we'll do it more biblically, frankly, and if we'll understand the importance that leadership plays in the vision of our church and all that, then I think we got a better chance to finish. And I think that's what we want. I know this without even asking you. Everybody in here wants to finish. We want to finish well. We want to hear well done. That's what motivates me. So, I don't know if I'm going to hear that or not, but that's what I'm working on. I want to hear well done. At least I did what I could do. I didn't leave anything on the table. You know, for me in my life, about every 5 years of my life, I feel like I get to that place where, okay, Russ, if you don't grow to the next level, then you're done. Now, I don't mean done like you're out, but done like this is as far as you can go. And I don't mean, guys, if you understand this, I'm not talking about the size of your church, right? If my son was here, he's a graduate at the great university, A&M, in College Station, Texas. And he works for the KPMG now, and he's in Dallas. But if my son were here, he'd say, it's a wonder my dad is still alive, because this guy is like a bobblehead doll when he drives down the highway. I'm like this. I go, there's an empty building. And I'm a church planter, right? So I'm an entrepreneurial guy. So I'm saying, that'd be a great location for a church. Or I'll see a church, and when we're vacationing stuff on Sunday morning, I'll see half a parking lot full of cars. And I know in my heart that, guys, just a little effort in there, that church could easily reach more people than it's reaching right now. Somewhere along the line, either let all of its dreamers go or ran them out. Something went wrong in there that could be fixed. And that church could reach more people. And so I'm just like that everywhere I go. I don't care what size church it is. Big church, little church. I have the same feeling when I'm sitting in front of you guys or sitting in front of 1,000 pastors. I don't care. The church is the church. Because remember, my benchmark is that little church of 100 people where I first time I ever heard the gospel. So I hope that you understand the gravity of what we're talking about here. I hope you understand it. I don't think it's the whole event. And what I really want to impress on you is that I think most of you are better pastors than I am, because probably most of you are in the 90 or 95% that you're really great pastors. You love people. You love teaching the Bible. You love evangelism, leading people. You know the whole idea of being a pastor, okay? And I mean that from kind of that heartfelt side of ministry. And I come from more of, I love building and developing the church for the effect that the church has on the community. So most of you are better prayers than I am. Frankly, most of you love people easier. I had to learn to work on just being a pastor. Some stuff that comes intuitively, naturally to you, this stuff I had to work on. I'm going to teach you some stuff that you're going to have to work on. It's natural for me, instinctive for me. So, but those are our strengths and our weaknesses, and so we bring all that to the table. All right, well let's get started this morning, and we'll understand how to give you the fire hose treatment. And the good news is that Eric is going to capture this, and so you will be able to go back and hear some of it if you want to. You've been looking at our mission and our vision. Let me just say a word about worldwide, and I'll say a word about mission and vision, because we hope that some of you will become coaches for your state eventually, and that's a long time from now, but that's a possibility. So I always want you to understand the roots of Ministry Advantage, because I hope you'll be connected to Ministry Advantage forever. We really believe that we're building Ministry Advantage for other people. We think that we hold this very openly. We don't think this is our thing. It's hard to find me on stuff. It's hard to find my face and my name on stuff. Even though I'm a founding president, I've never thought this was about me. So I'm a steward of this idea. And believe me, I thought we were going to put it to bed many times, and God won't let it go away. So when we sat down and said, God, what do you want us to do? We wrote out on literally on kind of a napkin in a spaghetti warehouse in Chicago almost 15 years ago now, this mission statement. And as we were writing it out, we said, well, maybe we should say worldwide. And we kind of laughed because ministry of evangelism really didn't even exist at this time. But what we were trying to answer was, what's in our hearts? What do we think God's calling us to do? We're all pastors. We're all serving, working, we're business guys. We all are up to our neck in everything we're doing. If we're going to give an additional effort margin to something, we jolly well better know why we're doing this and what the motivation is. So we put worldwide on there. Guys, when we started, that was as far from reality as I could even imagine. These days, since then, we are in all 5 capital cities of Australia. Been to Australia scores of times. I've got the flying miles to prove it. And we just have had a fantastic experience in Australia for 4 or 5 years. We're in Canada. We're really we have coaches now throughout Canada, all through Canada. We're in a couple of different denominations there. Personally, I do capital campaign work for guys that I know. I don't advertise that, just friendship stuff. But so I work. I'm getting really used to Canada. I'm starting to feel Canadian. I'm actually starting to watch hockey on purpose. that tells you something. So anyway, I've been to Africa 4 times in the last year and a half. We have an epicenter that we have a ministry advantage embedded in now, in a church of 2,500 in Ghana, and we have partnered with our church to build a pastor's resource center 3 hours outside the capital city of Ghana, and we held our first workshop, the first training in that brand new building back in December, and pastors came by motorcycle, bicycle, donkey, or however they got there, walking from all over the region. And we have a dormitory style thing there too, where some of them came with their spouses and stayed and brought their kids. You know, a lot of times what I'll do in a pastor's training thing is I'll start with a whiteboard like this, and I'll say, well, I want to talk to them just about the things that you feel the need for, right? That you're struggling with. Tell me the things that are just top of mind you walked into today. I like to do that. And so I'm talking through an interpreter 3 hours outside of Ghana in the bush. I'm just off I can throw a rock and hit the ocean. And so I'm talking through this interpreter to 35 or 40 pastors. And I said, so tell me. And then the guy's interpreting, he's telling me, and I'm writing it up on the board. And so I write all these like 20 things up on the board. And I said, well, here's what's interesting. About 90% of what's on the board are the same issues I get in the United States. So even though you're here in Africa, we deal with these issues all the time. You're dealing with the same stuff we deal with. The church is not that different. It doesn't matter where it is. Now, about 10% of these things are a little different. Okay, things that we don't normally do. Like, for example, one guy had that his number one problem he needed to solve right now was to find shade for his people on Sunday morning. Now, if you've been to Africa when it's hot, and you got a growing congregation, and you don't have a church building, you know exactly what he's talking about. He's saying, our people are dying out. They're having church at night sometimes because it's just too hot. So, you know, the church is incredibly similar no matter where you go in the world. The kind of things that we're going to talk about are classic and universal. But we've just been excited how God's taking ministry advantage worldwide. And if you guys have interest in any of those international connects, we'd love to talk to you, especially about Africa. That's our focus right now. We'd love to get in your church budget. We'd love to get you connected to projects we're doing. So give us a call. Our vision is to see every church reach its maximum redemptive impact. I heard Eric kind of espousing that a little bit. So just talking, using that term a little bit. Guys, what that means is that we believe that there is a maximum impact that your church and my church should be making right now, right? This is one of the reasons why we teach strategic planning. How do you create and implement a plan, a strategic plan? And this is really the motivation behind that, why we always do that first. Because I believe every church has a maximum impact that it should be making on the community right now, right? Well, the question then is that, well, what is that? How do you figure it out? Right? Well, I think you do that through a planning process. I think you do that through a planning process every 2 or maybe 3 years, right? Because communities don't change that fast. Your assets and resources don't change that fast. So we really need to get clear. What we talk about critical success factors in the planning process. What's critical for your church over the next, say, 2 years or 3 years? right? And there can only be one or two things that are critical. All things are important, not all things are critical. Some things are much more strategic to do them now than to do them 2 years from now. And here's the reality. We'll talk about all these things in depth. You cannot pursue everything at one time. So what happens is you get a mile wide and an inch deep. Right? So you have to know the great leaders in the great churches are really, really clear at any given moment. If you walk up to them and say, what are the one or two things you guys are pursuing right now that you're all in on, what I kind of call kind of a locker room mentality about, right? And I think I heard Bill Hybels say that. I think I'd like to give credit when I can. I think Bill's the first person I heard say that. Regardless, that locker room mentality concept is the right concept for me. Because that means when we get on the right idea, when we say this is the one thing that must change, and it must change in the culture of our church, it must change in the warp and woof of our church, it must become part of who we are in our church. Like other things, if somebody said, this is just a part of the DNA of our church, it has become that. This is the kind of thing we're talking about. And how do you create that next most important piece of DNA that needs to be part of your church? Okay? I'm not talking about the next meeting or conference you need to have, or one-off things, or a staff person you need to hire. We'll talk about this. What's a critical success factor? How do you figure it out? But when you figure it out, the great churches always can tell you, this is what we're about right now. In addition to the day-to-day, week-to-week, Monday through Sunday, what we're already doing, we know we're going to do nursery children, we know we're going to preach, we know we're going to worship, we know we're going to do youth ministry. But there's this overarching thing that we're giving all of our extra bandwidth to. And we've got this locker room mentality where everybody from the nursery to the senior adults knows this idea. They know what we're doing. They have a piece of it. And we're staying on this. We're working it through the church, and we're doing this. And it's probably going to take us 2 to 3 years until one day the people of our church, without asking them, say, you know what? Our church is really good at this. Whatever that is. Our church has changed. I'll give you an example. Probably 4 years ago now, we came up on our 3-year cycle at my church. And so our lead pastor is very strategic. He gathers our leadership staff together. And so we always do a retreat like this. And our leadership staff's about 12 or 13 guys that basically are responsible for all the ministries of the church. And so we go away, we get the whiteboard out, and usually we start from our values, and we put our values on the board, and then we'll do a weighted voting, and we'll rank order, and we'll say, how are we doing on value number 1? What does it look like in our church? How do we know it's happening? What is it? Is it good? Is it bad? We'll talk through all our values. And by the way, that's just a good exercise to do once or twice a year. Just go back to your values and talk through them and say, where are we seeing these? Does this happen in our church anymore? Is it ever happened? We say it, but is it real? And then after we talk through them, where we all kind of have a renewed feel for them, then we say, okay, everybody gets 3 votes, or 5 votes, or whatever you choose to do. And, or sometimes we'll just rank them all. So there's no way you can do weighted vote. So anyway, we're going to vote on it. And what we're going to do is take a marker, take a post-it note. We're going to go up and I'm going to say, this is the one that I think we're best at. I think this value is hot and it's the top. It's up, and there's no question that if you ask anybody in our church, that value just shines in our church. That's a home run for us. Whatever it is, evangelism, discipleship, Bible teaching, whatever your value statements are. I mean, there it is. It's number 1. And there's number 2. And so we do this every year. Guys, I'm telling you, for 10 years, well, I've been there 7. So for the 7 years that I've been on the staff, every year when we come and talk through our values and just do a quick, we spend maybe an hour doing that, right? And we just take a look at them and say, how are we doing? Listen, values are not numbered, right? Like this is not our number 1 value, number 2. Values are all equal. We're saying these are things that are non-negotiable. There's been enough values teaching in our culture. You should know that. So values are all non-negotiable, right? So even though we're rank ordering saying how are we doing on it, not what's number 1, what's number 2. They're all supposed to be non-negotiable. So then we look at the board and we say, Well, what are the 2 or 3 that we're really hitting home runs on? And frankly, on those, we don't need to spend any more time because right now, that value is hot, it's great, it's strong, we're doing better. The ones we got to pay attention to are where? The ones on the bottom. Why are we saying these are just lousy in our church? Right? So every year I'm there, for probably the first 4 years I'm there, every year the last value, dead last every time, is the value about we're a support system to the family who's the primary discipler of their children. Every time, because we're honest about rating our values. And the youth pastors will always go, look, I mean, we're doing everything we can do. There's great things happening there, but families have them a lot more than we have them. We're not getting any help at home. These families are not discipling their kids. You know that story. So every year we're seeing this. Finally, 4 years ago, for whatever reason, and this is how you deal with criticism, our sense from God was, you can't keep leaving that one on the bottom. It's time to deal with that. So we said, that's the one we're going to deal with. We're going to change that in our church. We're going to spend 3 years transforming our church and fixing the DNA of our church, because this sucks. And we got the stats to prove it. We're horrible at this, and we got to figure out what in the world is going on. We talk about it. We say this value. We got children's ministry. We got all this stuff. You know what we found out? So we went to work on it. A couple of things we chose to do. We did some surveying. We found out that parents were only talking about spiritual things with their families when they were either on the way to church, on the way home from church, or in church. 85% of our people said it's the only time we're talking to our kids about church. What'd you learn in Sunday school today? Or at lunch or what? You know what I'm saying? That's it. Then we said, it's worse than we thought. Then we said, well, why is that? We asked them, why aren't you discipling your kids? You know what they said? We don't know how. I don't have a clue how to disciple my child. How would I know that? Church is never talking about discipling my kids. I don't know. What would you say? What would you do? How do you do that? How do you teach? I don't know how to do that. See, because we got 5 or 10% of people that feel any confidence about discipling their own kid. What we did was, we created a system for them to outsource their kids to us. Now we still do that. We still say, bring us your kids and we'll do the best we can. But that was all we did. So they were just outsourcing their kids to us. They're outsourcing them to the youth ministry, outsourcing them to the children's ministry. Teach my kids, disciple my kids, please, please. I'll come to church, I'll give, I'll serve, I'll do whatever, but you guys disciple my kids. So it was no wonder they're not doing it. They don't have a clue how to do it. So we set out to say, we had no idea what this meant. We've got to turn this around. So very long story short, we wound up hiring a guy from Focus on the Family who was coming out of Focus, wanted to be rooted in a local church. We did a lot of books with Dr. Dobson and so forth. Had a real vision to say, family ministry, as good as Focus is, has got to be rooted in a local church, or it's not going to happen. Well, we shared that vision. We've got to try to figure this out. So it was marriage made in heaven. It was God's timing. And so we started a thing called Home Point. You can go to our church. We've got to learn some churches using Home Point now. We have 2 campaigns a year that focus on the family. We preach. We have a focus. One last summer it was like having a summer of intentionality. We taught them how to take summer vacations and what to do on your vacation. We created resources for them, things to do while they're on vacation. We challenged them to sign up, to make a commitment to do an intentional summer. We have a campaign about eating meals at home. Families don't eat together. You know this? I mean, do the surveys, guys. Most families don't eat together, hardly at all. So we had one campaign. This, I think, our most recent one was about. It was called. I can't remember what it was called. It was about eating at home. We created these. Our communications department created these. What do you call them? Placemats and all this supporting literature, right? All these things that you can do at home, and then the placemat's designed with kind of a game in it for the smaller kids. So while you're eating dinner, you've got the placemat in front of you, and you're actually discipling and learning things together. All kinds of games we put into recipe boxes. We put $250,000 into this thing we created Home Point centers on all of our campuses, which are right on what we call Main Street. So when you're in the Main Street, you're either going to see the Connection Center, or you're going to see Home Point, or you're going to see the Volunteer Center. So it was the first time we put something on Main Street in 15 or 20 years, because it's always just been the Connection Center, the Volunteer Center, and the bookstore, and that's it. And so we gave real estate in all of our buildings to it. So, and then we created it for other people. We felt like, if we can figure this out, then it will help other churches, and so they can, you don't have to create all this stuff yourself. And tons of other stuff come out. So my point about this is about how you change something significantly in your church over time. True story. So I'm standing at the Town East campus, which is the one I am campus pastor of. I still do what you do every day. And I just don't preach as much. And we're the largest satellite campus in our system, about 1,500 people. And I'm standing in this big hallway we have down the middle, and I hear some people behind me talking. They didn't know I was listening anymore. And these two people are talking about the campaign we're in at the time about the family. Now we're 3 years into this, right? 3 years. And as I hear this conversation go on behind me, and they're saying, "Have you noticed how Lake Point has really changed? You mean all this?" And they're talking about, "You mean this? You're talking about this family stuff, right?" Yeah. I mean, I don't remember us talking about these things this way, but I mean, it is really kind of who we are now. I mean, we talk about the family. These families are discipling their kids. These stories we're hearing, people going on mission trips. It's incredible, isn't it? I mean, it's really kind of like, it's kind of become like who we are. 3 years we've been working on it, and somebody's just got the light bulb coming on going. It's kind of in us now, isn't it? Now, it was encouraging, and it was such a reminder of how hard it is to change something that's significant in the church with all of the horsepower. And that's where, guys, where you have to learn. Leadership is about learning how do you create where you want to go. How do you design a plan to go there? How do you stay in that plan, on that plan, implement that? How do you get everybody involved in that? Otherwise, and we're just back where we started today, otherwise our dreams are just pipe dreams. And your dreams are too cool for them to not be real. Right? They're just too cool. There's just too many things sitting in this room that if you could learn how to do it a little better, could either become real or more real. And there's some of our dreams, and I did listen, everything I talk about, guys, I did the wrong way for years. Some of us wonder about what happened to that dream we had 2 or 3 years ago. And we started down that path, and it was so exciting, and people were so lit up about it. Right? Everybody in this room's got a story like it. And then what happened to that? Where did it go? How did we get off? How did we lose track of that? Right? And so, for my part, guys, what I want to do is help you accomplish your dreams. And we're not dream givers, by the way. We're not dream creators. Well, we don't care what stripe of church you are. We're not going to talk about your theology. I mean, we have a basic theological statement, ministry advantage. We're not going to, we're not going to work with cults and things. But other than that, guys, we're not theological in nature. You'll find that all of our content, Eric, you've known this a long time, is our content theological at all?
Nope.
Do we tell you what kind of church to do? Contemporary, traditional? Do we tell you what kind of small group system to run? No. Guys, what we want to do is we want to help you. If you know what God's called you to do, we want to help you do it. We want you to achieve what you're trying to do. And that's everything we're going to talk about, is just try to help you get to do that. And if you're not sure about what you're supposed to do, right? And we get there, sometimes we're real clear, and then one year you wake up and you go, all of a sudden it's fuzzy. I don't know. And I've been there. Like we were so clear for a period, and now we're fuzzy. How do we get fuzzy? So if it's fuzzy, then we want to help you clarify. Okay? All right, so we want to help you reach your maximum redemptive impact. That is something that every church should be able to ask themselves, are we doing it now? And 3 years from now, I think you've got to revisit it and say, now what is it? And are we doing it now? Because every 2 or 3 years, your staff changes, hopefully for the better. You have different. Sometimes you have different resources. Sometimes our budgets grow. Sometimes they don't. But let's just face it, okay? So you have staff realities, you have economic realities, you have physical realities in terms of your facility. You have geographic realities, the community change. So all of those guys, those are just realities, right? So the question we want is, whatever your situation is, are you having the maximum redemptive impact on your community you can have. Right? Based on wherever you are right now. And our process is going to teach you not only to do this once, but for this to become a discipline, that you're really kind of constantly doing it. You're constantly in it, or you're constantly revising it. Okay? All right, so let's we'll run through our values here real quick. Uniqueness of every church and every church leader. Again, we wrote those statements on napkins. I wouldn't give anything if we had kept them. The process of leadership development, one leader at a time. Guys, what we do and what we've done for all these years, we do it the hard way. We started out doing it the hard way. Now we have an online system, which has really allowed us to go to the whole world, and I'll talk about that later. But a good 10 or 12 years of ministry advantage, we really did this the hard way. You know what we did? We built ministry advantage like if you were trying to build a church by just doing home groups or start small, one person at a time. Right? No public meetings, no top of the funnel kind of idea. So we didn't start by going after the masses. We started by going one pastor at a time. And that really is our heart. And everything we do, we're constantly thinking about the individual church leader. The practical application of biblical principles in planning and implementing the church's vision. And guys, this is, you know, in the early days, I used to get so animated about this because in the early days, I used to get a lot more pushback. I get less pushback these days. I think because the need's higher. I don't know that people believe it any better initially. But I used to get all this pushback, and some of you, if you go into your church and you start talking about doing things differently in terms of leading a process or use planning or any of the kind of terms or stuff, you got to be smart about how you use these terms. But some of you will get pushback from your church and say, wait a minute now, that sounds like work. That sounds like what I hear at work. Yeah? Well, you know, if your company is working and making a profit, maybe it's not a bad idea to think about it. But not everything in business works in the church. There's no question about that. We used to get a lot of pushback. So my attitude is I love it. I'm like, bring it on. Okay? I'll take you from Genesis to Revelation. I'll wear you out and then ask you why you're not obeying so much of the Bible. Okay? Don't go after me about whether we talk about the biblical, and I'm going to give you two solid anchor reasons why that you're familiar with. Methods and tools that create systemic and lasting progress. Right, guys? So understand this. Everything that we do, the way we go at everything, the way we think, the tools we've created, you know, the mentality we have, is can we solve a problem in such a way so that it's not back on your desk in 3 months? Right? Systemically solve it. Right? If you have a temperature, you put the thermometer in your mouth, you have a temperature. Is your problem that you have a temperature? Do you need to treat the temperature? Sure, if the temperature gets out of hand, it can really damage it, right? So you've got to put some ice on it, you've got to take some Tylenol, you better treat the temperature and keep it down. But then we know the temperature is not the problem. What's the problem? Yeah, there's some kind of virus, there's something going on. Maybe the doctor figure out what it is. We better get after that virus, or because this temperature, all temperature is an indicator saying something's wrong here. It's like the heat meter on your car, right? So we want to deal with systemic things systemically. Now let me talk about the 2 core biblical principles. These are familiar with you guys. All you guys in here, I'm sure, are probably preachers and teachers. And so you should know both these passages really well. I'm going to challenge you that you need to take a new look at them. Okay? I know these passages well too. I've known them for years and years. I taught them, I preached them, I applied them in the church in different ways before I think I really had the right understanding of them. Ephesians 4 and Ephesians 4:11 is what? That classic passage on to equip the saints to do the work of the ministry, right? Depending on what translation you're looking at. And so let's take a look at the context. You know, I went to Dallas Seminary, and I was always taught, why don't you try to let the Bible interpret itself? Sometimes you just need to look at a larger passage. The Bible will tell you what it's talking about a lot of times, right? So this is Paul talking, and we know. And let me tell you, where he's headed is to equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. That's where he's headed. This is where he started, right? And he starts by saying that as a prisoner of the Lord, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you've received. Now you notice I left out about 10 verses right after this. I'll tell you why. So the subject here that Paul starts with is living a life worthy of the calling that you received in Christ. So who's our boss? Okay? Not the elders or the deacons or however you structure. Christ called, right? Christ called you. So get it clear, guys, that when we're talking about stuff, about how well we're leading, we always need to think about who's the boss. He's the leader. He's my supervisor. Now, I'm accountable to elders. I have been for 25 years of ministry. But Christ is my boss. And when I think about this kind of stuff, and how sober-minded I want to be about it, I need to remember He is ultimately my supervisor. And Paul sets that up. He tees it up. He said, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you received. The reason I left those verses out is because it's basically a parenthetical, what's called a Pauline parenthetical statement. And what that means is that Paul has this kind of ADD tendency that he'll bring up a subject, and a lot of times if he brings up a subject and he mentions Christ, then he goes off on this parenthetical thing about how cool Jesus is. And that's what he does in the next 10 verses. He says, Jesus is amazing, He's higher than, He's greater than, He's amazing, He's done all this great stuff. He goes through this whole passage, these 10 verses on talking about Jesus, right? But it's a parenthetical statement. And then he comes back in verse 11 to the subject, right? He goes like, oh, okay, and by the way, it was He, this Jesus that He's described, who gave some to be apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, teachers. And by the way, a lot of theologians don't believe this is an exhaustive list. I think Paul is saying these are the kinds of, if you're a leader in the church, this is your job, no matter what your role in the church is. Guys, well, I'm not going to argue that, but I think you have to think that way. Jesus didn't say these are the only roles in the church forever and ever, amen, right? There's lots of leadership roles in the church. So this is not exemption, but he's giving an example here. If you're a leader in the church, then here's your job description. I know I've talked to scads of pastors over the years, and I'm just confused about what my job is. That's easy. It's Ephesians 4:12. Your job is to prepare God's people for works of service. Okay? I'm going to translate this for you a little bit. Our job is to prepare God's people to do something. A lot of us in this room think that our job is to preach at people, because that's what we were trained to do. We're pastors now. You get this. Our schools are set up, and God bless them, and I love them. I went to Liberty. I went to DTS. I wouldn't trade for my theology. You better have good theology when you hit the street, or you're going to be all goofed up, right? So that's only half the issue, guys. If it's half, 70% of what you do every day has nothing to do with what you learn in Bible college and seminary, and that's the truth. Now, I'm glad I have it. It anchors me. It helps me to not do kooky things, but it doesn't help me really lead my church much. It might help me preach, those kind of things. Right? But 70% of what I do Monday through Saturday, I didn't get a Bible college seminary unless you guys did. I didn't get it. And we still don't get it. It's still not there. So the job is to prepare God's people for works of service. The problem is our schools are set up to teach us to be tellers, not to be trainers. It's implied and it's taught. So basically, when we get out of school or when we enter into ministry, we think our job is read and study the Bible, understand what it says, and tell them what it says. And when we read this passage over the years, what I think we've done is we say, okay, my job is to equip the saints to do the work of the ministry, and so we just spiritualize this passage away, and we go, well, that means I got to tell people to serve God. That's not what that says. I mean, just plainly not what that says. It doesn't say tell people what God says they ought to do. There's places in the Bible that tell us to preach the Word of God and all of that stuff, but that is not what that says. Here he's talking about the job of the church leader, any church leader, is to prepare God's people for things they're supposed to do, for works of service. Equip them, right? The King James Version, I think, says equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. And the word equip is a word that came from the idea of equipping a ship for sail, right? So Paul knew exactly the words he was using. Prepare, equip. It's like prepare, so it's the same word equip. God's people, it means fit them out, get them ready to sail. Do they need to know some stuff? Do they need to have, theology and know? Yes, but that's not all they better know how to do something on that ship. They better know how to do some tasks, take some responsibilities, or you're going to get out to sea on a ship that can do nothing, which is sometimes what's going on. So to prepare God's people for works of service so that the body of Christ may be built up. See, now that's what everybody wants. Every pastor I've ever known. So what do you say? I want a church to be strong. I want to be built up in Christ. Yeah? That says this is the way that's going to happen. You're going to have to prepare your people for works of service. Works of service is preparing God's people to succeed at what God has gifted and called them to do. Guys, for years and years and years, I've measured how I felt week to week about how good my message was. And if I preached well and people seemed to be affected by it, I felt good. And I had a completely transforming moment when I came back to this, when I came to what I believe is the straightforward teaching of this passage. Where God said, Russ, you are not succeeding when you preach a good message. That is part of your responsibility. But you're succeeding when you are equipping people, empowering people, training people, and when you're building a church that is equipping and training, empowering people to do what God's called them to do. When you see them doing what I've called them to do, and when you see them succeeding at their ministry, that's a win. Completely changed the scoreboard in my life. And I came to work. Churches work for me, so I came to work and I saw everything different. My whole agenda changed. Now my job, if you guys were leaders in my church, now my job is to equip Micah, to train you, to ask you what's your ministry, what are you doing, do you know how to do it, what help do you need, how can I train you, what kind of leadership tools do you need, what kind of growth do you need, what's going to help succeed. If I don't know what that is, I'm going to help Micah find it. And I'm going to keep helping Micah until I see him succeeding at what God's called him to do. And Micah gets the sense after a while that I really think my job is to help him. Now guys, I'm going to ask you a really hard question. You've got to be serious. You think about this. If I went to ask your leaders in your church what they think the pastor's job is, how many of them would say, well, I know what he thinks, I know how it makes me feel. He thinks his job is to help me succeed. He said it, he lives it, he does it. He's constantly asking me what I need, how can I help him. He's constantly getting me help.